Hello, Trump.
Guitar out and yeah. Big bunch this morning.
They had 8 kids, and one of the brothers, or he co-signed the note for his brothers, and they must have been shyster men. And the story
A lot of my uncles are that way.
ended up that my grandma had to sell that corner or that land, and then moved out to Cindy, Nebraska. With 8 kids and started.
Hey, John, you want to say the opening prayer? Remember to mention the prayer.
Hey guys, let's go ahead and start Bible class, and we'll start with a prayer. Father, we thank you that blessings have come to each of us in the midst of real life happening in all of our families. And we just pray for each one to be healed by your Spirit, each one to be saved by Jesus. And we pray, Father, that as we study your word, that you will show us the way to understand our world, the way to react to our circumstances, and a way to be a fulfilling lifetime follower of your Son, Jesus. Would you help us this morning as we study Genesis, and we study these two characters who were real people, Father, like Stu and Linda. They're not fiction, and they're not just a story. So help us to see your goodness. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. So today we're going to finish up on Jacob and Esau. Last week we had looked at how they were really a product of their environment, and they were seeing a lot of the deception and the behavior that we're going to see in them here today. They saw as children, and I couldn't get through everything that happened in Jacob and Esau's lives in two days. It's impossible. There's a lot of stuff we're going to skip over. So just let me me figure out what is wrong. Oh, there it goes. Software. Anyway. Okay, so we're skipping forward. Isaac is getting old, and he's ready to give his blessing, and that blessing goes to Esau. This was an important thing in the Old Testament. The birthright and the blessing were big things, and we talked last week about how Esau kind of looked at his birthright as with contempt. Maybe he just like, whatever, I was born older than him, I'm bigger than him. However he looked at it, he was not looking at it with respect. So Isaac is getting old and he's ready to bless Esau, and we learned last week that Esau is in fact his favorite. Okay, I want to control now. He's really not liking me today. Rebecca overhears this. Him talking to Esau about Esau going out, getting Esau to go out and get him some game so he can eat the game that he likes and then give him the blessing. Well, and Mama steps and puts it in gear, and she conspires with Jacob against both Isaac and Esau. It's interesting. I used to think that if God spoke more to us, things would be easier. God was speaking to Isaac. God was speaking to Rebecca. And I think they were kind of hearing what they wanted to hear. And she had a little bit of this deception in her as well. I don't know if she is remembering. Can somebody open up to Genesis 25:23 and read that? I don't know if she's remembering this at this point and doing that, what we talked about a couple weeks ago, putting wheels on the prayers. But she's definitely been told about these two boys by God.
The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.
And could this be Isaac and Rebecca fighting a little bit about who God was communicating more with and who knew exactly what God wanted and the other one did not? I don't know, but she's definitely about, she's going to make a mess. So she helps Jacob dress up like Esau. Added some goat skin for additional deception. I'm not sure if y'all ever petted a goat before, but man, Esau must have been a really hairy dude. I don't know if... Did she sew gloves for him?
Petting your beard.
She's like, did she sew him gloves? Or, maybe it was tanned and soft, but I don't know. Every time I read that, I'm like, I could just see this hard... Anyway. I think she sewed him gloves. And she puts, Esau's clothes on him for additional. And, of course, Jacob goes in, and we know that story. He feeds Isaac some game. Where did they get the game? I'm even wondering if they went so far as it was some stuff that Esau brought in the day before or something. So they make this dinner for him. And they walk Jacob in there, and of course Jacob, he probably had a higher voice. Who knows? Isaac knew it wasn't Esau's voice.
Hmm?
What verse?
Not verse 9.
So mine says the food he liked, but.
Well, yeah, that's what he asked for, but then Rebecca told Isaac to go get 2 young goats.
Well, okay, there you go. 2 young goats. Wouldn't that have also confused Isaac? So, Mom is encouraging all of this. Go ahead. Did you say something?
Oh, I'll tell her what's happening.
Oh. Mom is encouraging all of this. And it's interesting when Isaac is questioning him. He's like Peter. He calls curses down from God. He's telling Isaac that how did you get this back from the field so quickly? Oh, God blessed me, showed me right where it was. I mean, the arrogance in the deception is incredible. So then can someone open to Genesis 27 and read the blessing that he gave Jacob?
Twenty-seven.
27 through 29.
So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garment, and blessed him, and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of the heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you."
Thank you. So Jacob gets out of town, out of Dodge, and Esau shows up to hear the bad news. Can someone read Genesis 27, 39, and 40?
Your dwelling will be away from the earth, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will grow his yoke from off your neck.
So even the blessings are creating antagonism between these two boys. Well, they're probably men at this point. But even the blessing is.
I did notice that the blessing that he gave is exactly what the Lord told Rebekah earlier, that Esau's going to serve Isaac. And in both blessings, either whether you're talking about Jacob's or Esau's, he says the older is going to serve the younger, both of them. So even though he was deceived, he did exactly what the Lord told him.
It was God's will.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So you've got these two young men who are now going to be at odds at one another. The one showed quite a bit of deception to take not only the birthright, but now the blessing. And these were big things. So this was sort of like there were only certain kings who could withdraw whatever proclamation they made. And I think Nebuchadnezzar was one of the only ones who could. I think kings after that could not. Once they made the vow, that was it. So this was a serious thing when he said this. And it's kind of curious to me that.
I think what I find interesting is how Esau despised his blessing, and then here he's almost desperate. You know, he has two different reactions
Yep.
of the blessing.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that last week. Is that because he just assumed this was all a foregone conclusion? He wasn't going to have to work at it. He really didn't care. So it was something that was free to him. So he really didn't respect it.
Well, I think it's two distinct things from what it says here, that it's a birthright and then a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
So you say can't you at least blessing a blessing?
Yeah.
He knew he had given up his birthright.
Yep. And the blessing he gave him was actually a curse. So it was actually, well, this is the way it's going to be. You're going to serve your brother. He was not happy about this at all.
Well,
And
it's interesting that Isaac didn't have anything left to give to Esau.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest thing, is when he gave all the blessing to what he thought was Esau.
and we don't know at this point who gets most of the assets. So later on in the Old Testament, the oldest boy got 3 shares, two doubles. He got a double share what anybody else got. The oldest boy got the most of what the father had.
So that's what the birthright is.
Right.
Yeah, but you also had to take care of the mom.
But
So I don't know if it's worth a double.
Jacob was gone. I don't think he got
No, yeah, that's the other interesting thing about the story, and we'll see that. He's gone. He's going to get out of Dodge. He has to. Because at this point, whatever happened before where Jacob was not to be touched, that all changes here.
Hey, Martin, in verse 40, that second part, and maybe this is off course here, but if you or anybody knows, I'm just curious. When you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Does anybody know what that means?
I'm assuming what that says is as he gets older, he's not going to deal with them anymore. He'll move away. And we find when they run into one another later on in the story, he at that point has dealt with all of these issues.
Esau's descendants wind up east of the Dead Sea, in a mountain and all that. So they don't stay in the promised land.
Yeah, they went to the country of
Yep, Edom. So Esau hates Jacob, and he's vowed to kill him. And I don't think this is an idle threat. Like I said, there's a reason why Mama then steps in and sends Jacob away. She knows there's trouble, and it could be Isaac isn't going to stop it at this point, because Isaac is pretty hot about the whole thing. Yep. So at this point, whatever that Jacob is not to be touched is now gone. It's done. And Jacob, who thought he could deceive out of everything at this point, knows it's serious too, because he's packing his bags. And it's interesting, that point about the assets. Esau's left behind to take care of everything. Right? Jacob's the one who got the birthright and all these things, but then he bails on it. Anger is one of these things. Personally, for me, it's an easier feeling than some other feelings. You know, that's a manly feeling, right? Comfortable, I guess you'd say. But I can't imagine realizing that your mother is helped. That would hurt. That would hurt, and I would imagine that would create some feelings you don't want to feel. You know, it's some in the commentary say Esau might have been slow or a fool, or maybe he was, but he didn't deserve any of this. You know, this was a mess. And we talked a little bit about this last week. He was always been portrayed to me as the bad guy. He wasn't the bad guy here. Yeah, okay, his anger got to him here, and he shouldn't have let it go this far, but this is all just him reacting at this point. You know, I'm sure he felt just like another pawn. It's funny how you look at Jacob, and he was the one who's going to end up being the patriarch. But boy, at this point in the story, he's reminding me a lot of a couple of my brothers who might have needed a beatdown from time to time. And so you could put yourself in this story. These are real people. I mean, these are real people. So, if you knew my family, you'd understand, sort of thing. And it's interesting how their qualities in this family, somehow people tend to forget in the region when they're moving around. So nobody's share a story. I've got one that it's not me, it's my kids, and I won't mention names, but you know, anybody ever had a dust up with a brother or sister? And the story I've got is more humorous, and they were young. One of my daughters wanted to learn to golf. And so I gave her a pitching wedge and some golf balls, and out in the backyard, and put a bucket up there and showing her how to chip golf balls. Well, at one point, the other is out there taunting. And the one with the golf club kind of does a Happy Gilmore and right at her. misses her, drives it through windows. Of course, the one that didn't have a golf club came running in to tell that the other one. And I walk outside, and all she's doing, she's got the club in her hand, and she's like, "Dad, I didn't mean to break the window. I was trying to hit her." Oh yeah, when it's true, when that anger's triggered, it's triggered. If you know my kids, you'll figure out who was who. But anyway, that was when they were very young.
I used to pick on my two sisters, and my littlest sister, she'd always say, "Get me right on the phone." Well, she finally convinced my dad that was true, so he said, "Okay, stand still, and she's gonna slug me." So I got my hands behind my back, and I'm standing there and waiting for her to punch me in the belly.
No.
Oh no! Right so damn on the nose. Right on the phone.
And at that point in the story, you never picked on her again.
So true. She got her revenge.
She's got her revenge. Yeah, so, Jacob does the manly thing here and runs with the help of his mother. And I'll admit, some of you know this, in the past, when things got heavy in my life, as traveling sales guy, I'd disappear for a couple of weeks. And, that's that fight or flight. And he decided at this point he's not fighting, he's going to flight. He's going to run.
Well, I don't think he would have been much competition for his brother.
I don't think so. I think you can read that at this point. That, yeah. And it's interesting. She sends him to Laban, and it's far enough away. Even she now realizes there's tension here. What's been created, and that this is not a good thing.
Laban was her brother.
Yeah, the uncle. A ways away. So there's a bit in the story about how Isaac gets involved here and gives him a blessing to go to Laban to get a wife. So they must have there must have been a little bit of softening of feelings at that point, but he does give Jacob a little bit of a blessing, sends him off to go find a wife. And the rest of that story is because Esau has married 2 Hittite women. So you want to talk about chaos in this family. I don't know what, we don't need to look at it now because it was really last week's, but
Tell them not to marry a Canaanite.
And the parents can't stand whatever they're doing, whether it's their religion, whether it's their behavior, whatever it is, they can't handle it. We don't need to tell stories about that, but I do remember some of those, my mom and dad discussing people's choices for mates, my brothers and sisters.
I suspect it's different when you're in tight-knit families, but basically his dad tells him, you go marry one of your cousins. Well, we look at that today and we go, no, but we're a much bigger society today. I mean, how many people outside of the Canaanites do they really know?
Yeah.
So they may not have had much of a choice.
No. Well,
And I'm sure
Esau did, and you got to wonder if it was because he was out roaming the hillside, so he knew all these other folks around, or they knew him.
Yeah. But Isaac told him not to. Don't marry one of those.
But he did, and the parents were not happy. So that's all part of the story. She must be telling Isaac this is not going to happen again. We need to find him a proper wife. So Isaac says, okay, and they send him off to Laban. You want to talk about out of the frying pan into the fire. So on the way, he's all by himself. I can't imagine, at this point, you're walking across the desert and you're like, what have I done? I mean, do I have anything for all the deception and all the trickery? Do I have anything? I'm being sent away. I'm all by myself. I mean, at this point, he has to start thinking about, choices in life and the consequences for those. And
It does make you kind of wonder, he left What happened to the birthright? Who's controlling the birthright now?
And he didn't go back for almost 20 years. So Esau had to be the one taking care of everything. Okay, so Jacob's ladder, and no, I'm not talking about the Rush song, but probably not many here who know that song.
Love Rush, favorite band.
So this is in Genesis 28. Can someone read Genesis 28:10 and following? It's a lengthy read, but this is important to understand. God is reassuring Jacob.
Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of his sons there, he put it up into his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw stairway resting on the earth, with its tops reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There about it stood the Lord, who said, I am the Lord, God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants land on which you are alive. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and they will spread out of the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring back to this end. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. You tell me when to stop. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? Where is this? Is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
Yep, and that's far enough. So he has this dream about this ladder. Some versions say stairway, but the older versions say ladder. And he's seeing this ladder go up to heaven, and he's seeing God up there. He understands that's God up there that ladder is going to, and he's seeing angels descending and ascending. So people that are smarter than me are saying this is God telling Jacob, I'm running things, right? I'm up here. I'm not some local God. So back then they believed that gods were local. And they believed wherever they set up that altar, that's where their God was. Their God was around there. Very, very finite thinking. And God is trying to explain to Jacob that he's with him everywhere. And he says that to him. He's trying to help him understand, I'm with you. You need to go do what you need to do, and I'm going to be with you. And he's showing these angels going up and down, and that's to help him understand that God is in control. God is active in the world. God is not some passive God up there watching all of these things happen like an ant farm and shaking it once in a while. He's involved in making sure his will happens. And at this point, I guess I'm reading this as Jacob needed reassurance. He's trying to make sure Jacob goes to Laban. He is comforting him, and I'll never complain about a crick in my neck after sleeping wrong on my pillow again. I mean, these guys are using rocks.
I kind of left in a hurry. That's all I had.
That's all he had was a rock for a pillow. Yep.
You gotta remember to turn it over for the soft side.
Yeah, that's right, the soft side. And he said, I am with you. Then Jacob makes the vow at the very end. And we don't need to read it, but he's like, well, okay, if you're going to take care of me, then I'll do this and this and this. And he's, even at this point, is still negotiating with God. And it's interesting, you read that, you're like, well, I would never do that. We do that sometimes. We try to negotiate with God in our prayers. We try to elevate ourselves and say, well, if this happens, then I'll do this. And we all see those anecdotal stories where someone is saying, please, God, if you do this, I'll be good the rest of my life. And that's sort of what this is. He's trying to manipulate God. instead of subordinating himself, showing a little humility and understanding that God's in control, he still wants to control God, as the story goes. Okay, now he meets his future second wife at the well and is taken to Laban. I think this was love at first sight. I think he had a crush on her, and I think that was it. And, you know, the rest is history. This is Genesis 29, if you're following along. And then, surprise, 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 there is more family members that might be schemers and tricksters. Laban happens to be one of them. He is a product of his environment. And how ironic that God sends him to his uncle to let his uncle mess with him a little bit. I think they call these life learning lessons. So as the story goes, he works his 7 years, and on the wedding night, he's not given Rachel. He's given the sister, the older sister. Laban kind of failed to mention that in the negotiations about what his wages were. Wakes up the next morning and, oh boy. So, yeah, I would imagine that hurt. So then as the story goes, he works 7 more years to get Rachel. And they're given maidservants. And then in 29:31 through 24, they talk about all of his children and how he is starting to build the nation. So this is what the nation of Israel is going to be built on, is his sons. Now, does he realize that at this point? I don't know. So at this point, Genesis 30, whether he was feeling justified because of how Laban had tricked him, he begins to manipulate the situation and taking care of the sheep and the goats. So it talks about stripping bark off and laying it in front of them when the ewes are in heat and they have spots and stripes. So he knows all this, so he starts negotiating with Laban that he gets all the rejects. Well, they're not rejects at this point. He's scheming the system. He's working it pretty good. And whether this is him manipulating and knowing God's going to take care of him and protect him in this situation so he can go ahead and behave however he wants to, is he taking the grace as far as he can take it? I don't know if that's what's in his head at this point, but he is getting back at Laban. And at this point, his past is starting to catch up with him, or at least they're starting to figure out what his character is and what his behavior is. And it's Laban's sons are upset at Jacob, and whether they're seeing or understanding he's cheating, it doesn't matter. They're seeing their father's herds are dwindling and weak, and they're seeing Jacob's herds huge and healthy and thriving, and they're smelling a rat. And at this point, God steps in and says, okay, it's time for you to leave. Hopefully you've learned through this 20 years of hard work that maybe you need to stop scheming. Maybe you need to trust God. And he reassures Jacob once again. Evidently, Jacob needed to be reassured a lot. I will be with you. Go back to your father's land. So why do you think he keeps reassuring Jacob? We talked about it a little bit, but I didn't let anybody else say anything. Why would God have to reassure Jacob? I mean, it's like every chapter he's talking to Jacob a lot here.
Promised land is miles back south.
And who's there?
He has no real
Sure, he's still
desire
scared.
to go back. So God's got to push him back to protect the promise.
So this is that we talk about open doors and closed doors. This is one of these closed doors. God's giving him a boot saying you need to go that way. And you're doing the right thing, and I'm with you, and I'm going to protect you. But he is exactly right. He's pushing him. Can someone read, now we're in Genesis 32. We're moving pretty quick here, but we'll get to the end, hopefully. Genesis 32, can someone read 9 through 12?
Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the Lord who did say to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to thy servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. So with
12.
okay, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brothers, from the hand of Esau, for I feared him, lest he come and attack me, my mother, the brothers, with the children. For thou didst say, I will surely prosper you, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude."
So at least in this situation, he started praying to God and not looking for help to get out of the mess at the end. He knows, he remembers how mad Esau was. He knows what he did to Esau. And he knows that Esau wanted to kill him. So he's praying to God at this point, and he's being much more humble than he was before. He's not being arrogant about it, and it doesn't sound like he's manipulating at this point. He is reminding God what his promise was to him several times, but he is looking to God finally. He is starting to change those stripes. He's starting to act like the man God wants him to be. And then he wrestles with God. And this is always an interesting one to me. I've never really gotten my arms around exactly why this happens and why Jacob, let me get to it, sorry. Good grief.
Backing up just a little bit while you're looking that up, I think it's really interesting the way Esau met him. He said all this stuff forward. I'm going to give you this and give you this and give you this. He's hoping to buy his forgiveness.
Yes.
But in the end of it all, Esau just wanted to be back with him.
Yep.
He ran to meet him. Not in anger, but just glad to see him.
So this is Genesis 32 and 22, if you're following. So he's prayed to God. He's making a plan. He mentioned he's going to start sending gifts ahead. Is he paying back for what he thinks he took from Esau? Is he trying to bribe him? Is he just trying to be nice?
I think he's trying to bribe him.
Or at least he's showing him, I got it. I don't need you to serve me. In fact, here's some gifts.
I think he's worried that God didn't want to Esau would take
Everything. Because he might be, he's not necessarily the one who heard all of those other promises. He does know that God's going to bring a nation out of him. God doesn't necessarily say you're going to be alive when it happens. He might be like, well, maybe I'm not part of the story anymore because there's the kids, there's the wives. Maybe Esau could take the whole thing over. I hadn't thought of that. So, this is not me, this is someone else, a theophany, or maybe a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, the man who identifies himself as God, who's wrestling with Jacob. So, why do you think God appeared to him this way and then allowed him to wrestle him all night? It's interesting, it says, when the man could not prevail. Let's face it, we all know God was going to prevail in wrestling with Jacob. He was not a 4-year NCAA champion, and this is God. So God's wrestling with Jacob. So what's going on here? Why is he doing this? So he's there sort of reassuring, but why is he wrestling with him? And why is Jacob trying to win?
I think that he's testing how committed Jacob is to really doing it. You know, Jacob could have said, well, I'm going back to Laban. This is too hard. I'm giving up. And he didn't. Here he took a stand and stayed with him.
So he's holding on to him. He's like, no, not till you tell me it's going to be okay. I'm not letting go.
Maybe differently, but haven't we all wrestled with God? Because we wanted to do things our way. You know my story with the chicken factory.
Mm-hmm.
I wrestled with God, and He finally just told me to stop. And I paid to stop it. If they're selling the property and moving out, glory to God.
That's good. You had told me that. And that is really all part of this story, and that great segue that we all have to wrestle with God. We have to wrestle with other people. We have to wrestle with life, and that's really what this is showing, is that in life it's not gonna be easy. There's gonna be tough situations, and then at the end he touches him on the hip and makes him lame. No, he remembered the rest of his life when he walked. This situation right here, where he gave in to God and said, you know what? I'm going to let you run things. And I think that's what happened here. And I think that's why God wrestled with him all night. He was like, okay, we need to make sure that this takes. But I always thought that it was interesting. Left him lame, and every time he took a step, he remembered God. And then he gives him a new name. So, Israel, and 12 tribes of Israel. And the country later named Israel. But so it could mean having power with God, one who wrestles or struggles with God, one who strives or prevails with God, or Prince of God. So God gives him this name. Why? Why does God change his name here? What is God trying to instill in Jacob? This is as much for Jacob as it is anybody else. What was Jacob before? What's his name mean? Deceiver. What's his name now? One who prevails with God. So
we could go back to where he says, if you'll bless me, in chapter 20, then I'll serve you. That might be the wrestling that he does all the time he's been waiting, and all the time that he's traveling back and still testing and prodding.
mm-hmm.
And finally, God said, look, I'm going to take it to the finish line. You don't like the fight? Here we go.
Yep, this is graduation day. This is the solo flight. And he gives him the new name. He says, you're not a deceiver anymore. Your past is in the past now. Now you're God's tool. Now we're going to do some things. Your identity is not found in that deception, in that cheating, in the lying, and the mess with your brother. None of that is your identity now. Your identity is me, God. So we're going to give you a new name to remember you, that you can remember this, and that everybody around you will remember this and know this.
Sounds like God protected him at that point. Was he a perfect person?
Nope.
Nope.
Was not. But he probably wasn't going to be scheming over goats anymore. So, and we talked about this, Jacob Israel now tries to bribe Esau. So whatever was going on there, he still wasn't confident that he was going to walk up there and Esau wasn't going to kill him or take everything from him. And we're almost out of time real quick. So then Israel goes up and bows to Esau. This is not the same guy who stole the birthright and tricked Isaac. This is not the same guy. This guy has grown up a little bit, and he's checked all the manipulation. And at this point, he knows. All right, God, here we go. Going to do it your way. And he did. He bowed to him. And then, of course, we all know the rest of the story, that Esau just runs up and hugs him. You know, Esau is glad to see his brother again. Well, because maybe he didn't know if Jacob might have been the same Jacob of the past with some trickery or something going on. He wanted to make sure he had some muscle. But it does show that Esau has undergone a lot of changes at this point. So maybe God was working on Esau this whole time. Well, he was.
Well, and I'm just thinking about Esau forgiving Jacob for all of his sins, and Joseph forgiving his brothers for what they did to him. So it's, generations later, that forgiveness.
Yep. So not only was all that deception going through there, but God was working on all of that, but these were all normal people, right? And that's the great thing about these stories. I never really looked at them as normal people. They're normal people. There was stuff going on. They were making bad decisions. There was hurt. There was pain.
Really, the story goes all the way from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to
Joseph and his brothers next week.
It's all about how deception makes life so difficult.
And if you just trust God, and I think this is another one of those, we talked about this several weeks ago, how do we let go and let God? Here's one of those proofs right here. So God worked on Esau too. He mended it. Now it took time, but it wasn't Jacob's job to deceive and manipulate Esau into forgiving him. It was Esau's right, and it took some time. And maybe that's why he had to work 20 years with Laban, so that Esau's heart could be changed, and that Israel could get back home.
Well, and that's another thing. I have a note that says when the blessing was given out there around 40. How many of us, and I know there's some of you that aren't 60 yet, but how many of us that are 60 are the same person that we were when we were 40? I've changed so much in the last 20 years. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, this 60-year-old didn't like the 40-year-old. Okay, so last slide. God uses people with dysfunctional families, with rebellious children, deceivers, and the one thing they have in common is God. God uses broken people. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm blurry-eyed because went down to Texoma Friday morning and was back yesterday afternoon and around the water twice. 100 stripers. We caught a 50